Welcome back to our news bulletin. Over 1,600 people have died from COVID-19 in the U.S. as the country's death toll exceeds 77,000. Meanwhile, Brazil has reported a record 751 deaths in one day with over 10,000 new infections. Globally, the number of deaths from the virus has exceeded 274,000 with nearly 4 million infection cases. Further details in this report.
Since there has been a slight decline in new infection cases in some countries, governments are cautiously easing the lockdowns. The U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention has recommended guidelines to the government on the resumption of activities. White House says the document, with step-by-step advice to help states safely reopen public places, is being edited. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo said the number of people hospitalized for the coronavirus across the state has fallen to a 6-week low. He said the hardest-hit state has figured out how to control the COVID-19 beast.
Change in hospitalizations, you see, has been going down. Change in intubations is also down, and that's really good news. The percentage of people once intubated that actually successfully come off a ventilator is very low, so that is very good news.
Elsewhere, the EU says restrictions on travel into Europe will be kept in place until at least mid-June. Italy has now become the third country in the world to record 30,000 deaths from the coronavirus. The UK says there will be no dramatic changes to the country's lockdown. The airlines say British government has told them to bring in 14-day quarantine for anyone arriving in the UK from any country. Britain's Environment Secretary said there will be a cautious approach to ensure there is no second deadly peak of infections.
We have to be realistic that there isn't going to be any dramatic overnight change. We will be very, very cautious as we loosen the restrictions we have. As the data that we're outlining on a daily basis shows, we are not out of the woods. There are still major challenges with this virus. We will be living with this virus for some time to come.
Meanwhile, China has reported only one new coronavirus case and no new deaths for over 3 weeks now. In Russia, authorities have extended a lockdown in the capital until the end of the month, while Australia's most populous states have held back from easing restrictions, while some states allowed small gatherings and open restaurants.
In Pakistan, the death toll from COVID-19 has surged to 618 with 24 new deaths in the last 24 hours. The Health Ministry reported 1,600 infection cases since yesterday, bringing the total to nearly 27,500. It said over 7,700 patients have recovered so far. The ministry said more than 270,000 tests have been conducted countrywide, with nearly 12,000 since yesterday. Meanwhile, Pakistan has introduced a platform called FM Connect Digital, the thought leaders, for a global perspective to tackle the pandemic. The platform will see the foreign minister hosting a diversity of digital discussions with thinkers and researchers over the virus. More from Pakistan, as 6 security personnel have been martyred in an IED explosion in Balochistan province along the border with Iran. The military's media wing said the troops were returning back to their base after routine patrolling when their vehicle came under the attack. It said the troops were checking possible routes used by terrorists in the mountainous terrain in the region. One soldier was also wounded in the attack. Massive anti-India protests and rallies continued across occupied Kashmir against martyrdom of freedom fighter Riaz Neku. Neku, along with 3 other freedom fighters, was martyred by Indian forces last week in Pulwama district. The protesters across the valley chanted anti-India slogans. Continuing the brutalities, Indian troops fired pellets and tear gas to quell the spiraling protests. Medics said at least 8 dozen people with bullet and pellet injuries were brought to a hospital in Srinagar. They said most of the injured had been hit by pellet guns in one or both eyes. The occupied valley is reeling under New Delhi's crushing curfew and communications blackout for the past 279 days. Indian police have booked a student of Jamia Millia Islamia University for condemning troops' atrocities in occupied Kashmir. The right-wing Hindu organization Bajrang Dal filed a complaint against the law student in northern Uttar Pradesh state. In a social media post, Mahanoor Parvez said Indian forces have illegally occupied the valley and are committing human rights violations. The student called security personnel war criminals for targeting Kashmiris fighting for their liberation. Earlier, Indian authorities arrested 3 female Muslim activists for taking part in Anti-Citizenship Act protests. Meanwhile, prominent activists including Umar Khalid have been booked under controversial Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. In another news, U.S. Special Envoy for Afghanistan Zalmay Khalilzad has lauded Pakistan's role in the Afghan peace process. During his visit to India, Khalilzad said the U.S. encourages and supports the objectives of Pakistani leadership. In an interview, the U.S. envoy said time has come for devising economic strategy which would make Afghanistan a platform for regional cooperation. He said India does not hold a vital role in the Afghan peace process despite its investments in the country. Khalilzad said India should hold security talks with the Taliban directly. Meanwhile, Pakistan has reaffirmed its support for Afghan peace as Khalilzad met Army Chief Qamar Javed Bajwa. Earlier, U.S. envoy held talks with Taliban delegation in Qatar and discussed the implementation of Doha peace agreement. Iran's envoy to the UN, Majid Takht Ravanchi, says the U.S. has endangered multilateralism across the world. During a virtual meeting of UNSC, Ravanchi said Washington's withdrawal from treaties shows systematic contempt for international laws. Ravanchi said such policies have posed a challenge to multilateralism and jeopardized countries' collective interests. He said the US and some other countries have undermined the United Nations' credibility through their policies. The envoy said these states have resorted to inhumane measures such as sanctions. US President Donald Trump and Saudi King Salman bin Abdulaziz have reaffirmed their strong defense partnership during a phone call. The leaders' conversation comes after news of the US plans to withdraw 2 Patriot anti-missile batteries from Saudi Arabia. A White House spokesman said both sides agreed on the importance of stability in global energy markets. He said Trump and King Salman discussed the latest developments in defeating the coronavirus pandemic. Saudi state media said the 2 leaders reasserted keenness on the continuation of joint endeavors to consolidate regional security. It said King Salman highlighted the kingdom's efforts to reach a comprehensive political solution in Yemen. It said Trump stressed the U.S. commitment to protect its interests as well as the security of its allies in the region. The U.S. has accused China and Russia of spreading false narratives regarding the coronavirus pandemic. The State Department's Global Engagement Center coordinator Leah Gabriela said Beijing is adopting techniques honed by Moscow. Gabriela said the already existing cooperation rapidly accelerated during the pandemic. She said both countries want to shape public understanding of the pandemic for their own purposes. Earlier, the Global Engagement Center said thousands of Chinese and Russian linked through social media accounts were spreading conspiracies about the contagion. Beijing and Washington have been blaming each other for the virus, but the medical experts along with Beijing and the World Health Organization have rejected the idea of a man-made virus.
If it were man-made, it would look like some virus that we already have in some laboratory. All right. And it doesn't look like any of them because someone would have had to start with those and make this virus out of it. And so that's the key. We have no such virus that's close to this. This is completely new when it emerged and obviously came from nature.
Now, Libya's UN-recognized government of national accord says Khalifa Haftar's forces have killed 4 people of the same family in an attack in Tripoli. The health ministry said a rocket struck the Enzara region during the evening prayers of the day. Despite declaring a ceasefire in the holy month of Ramadan, Haftar's forces have increased raids in the country. Meanwhile, the UN mission in Libya condemned indiscriminate attacks on civilians during Ramadan and COVID-19 pandemic. The mission said it will document violations and share them with the International Criminal Court. Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammad Shtayyeh says banks have decided to defy Israeli regulation and not to close the accounts of prisoners. This comes after Tel Aviv asked banks in occupied West Bank to close accounts of prisoners' families. Israel's move drew a backlash as one branch of Cairo Amman Bank was torched and another fired on by gunmen. Shtayyeh and bank managers held talks over the past 2 days after a new regulation was implemented. Following the talks, the banks agreed to take a uniform stance and refused to shut the accounts. In a statement, the Prime Minister said families can use their accounts as usual and the Palestinian Authority will continue to transfer funds to them. Venezuela says it has requested the U.S. authorities for detention and extradition of American military veteran Jordan Godreau. Caracas has accused Godreau and 2 Venezuelans of involvement in the alleged failed armed incursion plot, issuing a total of 22 arrest warrants. Speaking in Caracas, Chief Prosecutor Tariq Saab said the accused will be charged with terrorism, conspiracy, and illicit trafficking of weapons. The incident left 8 people dead and over a dozen in custody, including 2 U.S. men accompanying the dissident Venezuelan security forces. Meanwhile, Venezuela's opposition leader Juan Guaido said his government does not need to hire mercenaries to liberate the country. In a video message on Twitter, Guaido denied his involvement in the alleged failed plot to overthrow President Nicolas Maduro.
Also, of course, inventing Venezuelan government new excuses to keep chasing, to arrest me. But I'll tell you something very clear, Maduro. If you're so brave, go ahead. You're a dictator. Here there's no law. You don't need excuses or that the other one to give the order for you. Do you think you're going to scare me? That I'm going to go into hiding? Assume your cost. No one believes your lies.
We're taking a short break now, but stay tuned for more news. Welcome back. Russia is marking 75 years of the Soviet victory over Nazi Germany in World War II today. Addressing the event, President Vladimir Putin says the Victory Day will be celebrated with a military parade on Red Square. Paying tribute to those fallen during the war, Putin laid red roses at the Eternal Flame at the tomb of the unknown soldier in the Alexander Garden. In a telephone call, China's President Xi Jinping extended warm congratulations to Putin on the occasion of the Victory Day, while Belarus celebrated the day by holding a traditional anniversary parade amid coronavirus, saying the epidemiological situation in the country allows it. Earlier, Britain's Queen Elizabeth paid tribute to those who died in World War II.
The wartime generation knew that the best way to honor those who did not come back from the war was to ensure that it didn't happen again. The greatest tribute to their sacrifice is that countries who were once sworn enemies are now friends, working side by side for the peace, health, and prosperity of us all.
In Germany, Chancellor Angela Merkel and President Frank-Walter laid wreaths at Berlin's memorial to the victims of war and dictatorship. In other news, Germany says there is a growing risk of a hard Brexit amid floundering trade talks between the EU and the UK. This comes after the two sides failed to agree on whether to extend the negotiation period beyond the end of the year. In an interview, Foreign Minister Heiko Maas said it is worrying that the UK is moving further away from EU's jointly agreed political declaration on key issues. He said there is currently neither a common ground on a comprehensive trade deal nor on the time frame of negotiations. Maas said the British government is still refusing to extend the deadline. Meanwhile, Ireland also said the pandemic has made an already difficult timeline for a British-EU trade deal virtually impossible. The US has blocked a vote on a UN Security Council resolution calling for a global ceasefire during the COVID-19 pandemic. The diplomat said the United States objected to an indirect reference to the World Health Organization in the text. They said resolution drafted by France and Tunisia was prepared after 2 months of negotiations. After amendments, the new draft emphasizes the urgent need to support all relevant entities of the UN, including specialized health agencies. The WHO is only health agency of the United Nations. A U.S. State Department spokesperson said the Council should move forward with a resolution limited to supporting UN Chief Antonio Guterres' call for ceasefire. He said otherwise there should be a broad resolution urging countries to commit to transparency and accountability in the context of COVID-19. The World Health Organization says countries must carry out basic principles of public health surveillance in order to control COVID-19. The call for greater vigilance comes as more countries move towards reopening economies battered by the pandemic. The global health body said countries lifting restrictions and opening economies should be ready to quickly identify cases if they resurge. Head of WHO's Health Emergencies Program, Mike Ryan, urged governments to stick together as the disease spreads from country to country.
We have seen time and time again in countries that have contained this virus and brought it under control without the need for massive lockdowns, have done it through the application of principled, human rights driven, but sometimes quite aggressive public health surveillance.
Madagascar is putting its self-proclaimed plant-based cure for COVID-19 on sale, and several countries in Africa have already put in orders for its purchase. This comes after days of no recent development on the coronavirus vaccine or human trials around the world. Last month, Madagascar President Andry Rajoelina launched the herbal remedy, saying it has already cured 2 people. The COVID-19 organics cure has been developed by the state-run Malagasy Institute of Applied Research. Tanzania, Equatorial Guinea, Congo, Liberia, and Guinea-Bissau have all already received thousands of doses of COVID-19 organics free of charge. Madagascar said it will now begin selling the remedy, which can be bought for around 40 US cents per bottle.
So there are some critics, there are some suspicion, but the most important thing is that we are offering a solution to save lives and to help other people. And I think that is very important. And then everyone has a choice to accept it or not.
The tonic has not undergone any internationally recognized scientific testing. The World Health Organization has cautioned the tonic needs to be tested for efficacy and side effects. Now we go to Congo, where the army says it has killed 23 militias during clashes in Ituri province. At a briefing, the military said it has captured 12 militants and regained control of 4 villages in the territory of Djugu. The military said the fighting was part of ongoing Operation Ituri, launched to end decades of insecurity in the area. It said the villages recaptured by the army include Lipri, Nyangare, and Kabakava. The gold-rich northeastern province of Ituri has witnessed inter-ethnic tensions between the Lendu and Hema communities since December 2017. The army has appealed to other militias to assemble at a transit site to avoid being pursued. In India, hundreds of migrant workers have clashed with police in the western Gujarat state. The workers are demanding a return passage to their homes amid COVID-19 lockdown. Police said they have detained over 40 workers for pelting stones on security personnel. The local officials said workers asked the district administration to arrange for their travel back to hometowns. Said most of these laborers worked in industrial units at Hazira and lived in Mora village. They said police have cordoned off the area and tightened security there. British Coast Guards have rescued over 120 migrants who were trying to cross the English Channel on 7 small boats. The French Maritime Authorities said border and coast guards in Britain and France intercepted numerous attempted crossings in recent months. In a statement, a charity organization said people living in France's refugee camps are desperate to make this dangerous crossing. She said these people are fleeing terrifying situations in some of the worst, dangerous parts of the world. In California, hundreds of people defied lockdown orders to watch glowing neon blue crash to shore in El Salgado Beach. Scientists say the phenomena is caused by microscopic marine algae known for their bioluminescent displays. By day, the algae are reddish-brown, but at night, when they are dispersed by waves, they put on a dazzling natural light show. Scientists say precious luminescent events have lasted between a week to more than a month. Beaches in Los Angeles County are closed as part of California's coronavirus-related public health restrictions. Tesla employees have returned to work at the company's vehicle factory in San Francisco Bay Area, with some wearing masks. This comes on the same day health officials said Tesla must not reopen as local lockdown measures to curb the spread of the coronavirus remain in effect. On Thursday, Tesla's chief executive Elon Musk told employees that limited production will restart at the factory in Fremont. California Governor Gavin Newsom also said manufacturers in the state will be allowed to reopen, but Alameda County, where the factory is located, is scheduled to remain shut until the end of May. Health officer for the county said after many discussions with the company, they have recommended Tesla to wait at least another week to reopen.
Had a lot of discussions with Tesla, and we've actually also recommended that, along with the other things that we want to wait on, that we had loosened certain restrictions on May 4th, and we wanted to see at least a couple weeks under our belt to make sure that we weren't seeing an impact on our indicators from that loosening, or not a significant one that was concerning, before we then loosen that next layer.
Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.